No one told me being a Christian would be this hard, guys. Cause like, where is this land of milk and honey? Cause I've been walking.
Absolutely.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to another video, because Shiro plus video equates to Shidio, and I'm glad that you're back to see what I have next to offer. I wanted to make a video on my faith for a while now, and the time has arrived where I feel like I'm ready to do so. Before I was hesitant just because when the topic of faith comes up, people can really get in their feels. However, if I don't talk about my faith, I feel like that's just as bad, because I know I'm prone to be wrong, especially since I have not reached a steady stride in my walk with God. Believe me. But the point is to share what I've experienced from my perspective, especially since I think my perspective could be a relatable one, whether you've been on this walk for a while or whether it's been on and off. I think you'll be able to connect with some of the things that I have to say. Before I begin, guys, I just have to let you know that this will not be a complete video, because guys, I was looking at my notes and I realized that if I don't chop this thing into pieces, then it's going to be the longest video I'll ever make. So I decided to turn it into a series called The Christian Walk is Bittersweet, my friend. I know it's a long title, but I like it. I like it a lot. So this episode will be focusing on my background, just so that you have a rough idea of my history in the faith. Also so that you're able to put it into context. So the background I will be giving you will be my church, family, school, and university in relation to my faith. So grab yourselves a chair and some butter, because this is gonna be a long talk. To start, I have to say that I was a Christian before I even knew I was a Christian, and by that I mean I grew up in a Christian family, more specifically a non-denominational Christian family. Non-denominational Christians simply don't associate themselves with already established denominational churches, but one would argue that by deciding not to be part of a denomination, that we have in fact created a denomination. My experience in churches has been a routine of worshiping for 30 to 45 minutes and then going off to Sunday school while the main church had its own service, and that lasted for about 45 minutes to an hour. So in total I had 1 to 2 hours of church every Sunday. I always loved going to Sunday school, not necessarily because I loved God, but just because it was more exciting than just sitting still to listen to a man speak for an hour, which is honestly torture for a 5-year-old. And in Kenya it's worse, because the services there are very long, at least the ones I've been to. I remember sitting in services that were 3 to 4 hours long, guys. So as I got older, like 6 to 12 years old, is when the church seemed to be creating more midweek activities for the kids to be a part of. For example, dance rehearsals or games or any form of activity to engage the kids with. I also recall once playing Mary for a Christmas play that my sister once directed.
Let's go back to where we were.
As a whole, I was very excited about church and the people there. I knew my Bible stories and my verses, and not necessarily because I love God, but because that was just what we did. What I can also add is that I don't think at that point I really recognized God as anyone more than someone who we worshipped, and also someone who sent his son on the cross to die for me. Around the age of 11 or 12 is when I stopped attending Sunday school, and I started sitting in the main church, not taking notes, just purely listening, but not having a profound connection with God. At home, my family had evening devotions, usually going through one chapter, but then again, I wasn't moved again. I knew my stories, I knew the moral of the stories, but it didn't register past that. My family, I would say, was rather strict when it came to the things that we watched, listened to, and even wore. Not that I didn't find my way around that, but there was a strong sense of what was tolerable and what was not. To a certain point, I could deal with it. Obviously, as I grew older, it was harder to tolerate those restrictions, so to speak, especially when I reached high school and I could see how laid back other people were about certain things. So as I became a teenager, I think it became harder for me to accept that my family seemed to have a higher bar of limitations compared to other households in line with that. So it had its pros and cons in that on paper it kept me aligned with what would be considered good and righteous. However, in spirit it was kind of the opposite, because I don't think it was coming from a genuine place of wanting to do what was considered good and righteous. Only further down the line did things begin to change regarding this. In a nutshell, I grew up in a family that was God-fearing and that instilled certain standards in me that would later on bear fruit when I'd decide to truly and voluntarily walk with God. Oh, I know you guys are waiting for this one probably. So my Christian walk in my schooling has never been a linear one. I think each transition gave me a different outlook on the faith. So I was in a constant Christian-like environment up until the end of high school, from which point I went to university. Let's be honest, Christian universities are not popular options even to Christians themselves. So during primary school we followed the ACE system, which stands for Accelerated Christian Education, and basically this system had us working with PACEs. PACEs are basically mini booklets for each subject that you have to complete before you can move on to the next one. On average you had to finish about 10 PACEs for each subject every year. The PACEs were tailored to engaging kids with teachings of Christianity. So it really indulged us in Bible verses and moral stories with like Christian teachings behind them. Even every so often we had to memorize parts of the Bible that had to be recited by a due date. Let me just tell you guys, there was always that one set of kids who would leave it up to the last day. But I however, I did not come to play, girl. I did not come to play. The next day, I would recite my Bible.
Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the sun. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal.
I know you guys are gonna be like, they're teaching kids about killing! No, guys, it's just the Bible. So the school used to hold chapel every week, which I always loved, especially when big groups would come over to share a word and also act out multiple scenes to send a message to our little hearts. So at this point, I was going to church on average about 2 to 3 times per week, depending on what was happening, okay? All in all, it was a good education, but it did have its cons in that it kept us in a bubble, in the sense that they wouldn't touch on sensitive topics like drugs, sex, and alcohol. And some people might think it's okay, but it really isn't. Like, the school only taught us about puberty after I had already gone through puberty. Like, really, man, I want a refund, okay? I'm just joking. We weren't allowed to hug the boys. We weren't allowed to wear spaghetti tops. Mind you, as kids, we weren't also allowed to play secular music. So by the time I reached high school and I found them playing Michael Jackson's Thriller, I was shook. I don't mean to imply that the school was bad, okay? I actually look at that time with nostalgia because I remember being very excited to go to school every day until my last. I just feel as though it didn't prepare me for the real world, so I walked out of that institution very naive because my perception of the world was very, very narrow. As saturated as faith was back then, I don't think it had a big impact on my life in the sense of knowingly. I think I was just doing things because that was what I was told to do, not because I had yet reached knowing God on a deeper level. Before I finished primary school, I had given my life to God multiple times and been baptized twice because it wasn't caught on camera the first time. I remember being really excited about that part because I thought it meant that I'd get to start over and that everything I did in my past no longer mattered. Okay, so fast forward to high school where I changed schools, more specifically a Catholic school because my primary school was non-denominational. Side note, I had not changed denominations in my own life, it's just that it was a really good school. So this was the first time I was exposed to a priest referring to him as Father, and the chapel had these paintings on the wall depicting Christ's life up till his resurrection. I'll be honest and say that I found it rather exciting, honestly, to witness the Catholic faith, just because it was more interesting than my previous church. It wasn't that I was now considering becoming a Catholic, but it was in a sense just very beautiful to watch the process. Not everyone in the school was Catholic, not everyone in the school was even necessarily Christian. I remember there was one kid in my class who was an atheist, and if I remember, there was also a girl who I recall being a Buddhist. Regardless of your faith, chapel was compulsory. But this high school wasn't serious, guys, I would say, because yes, we had chapel every week, yes, we had religious education, we even began each year having mass at the biggest Catholic church in town, but outside of that, there wasn't anything else I would see that exuded a Catholic faith kind of school. The books had nothing religious about them, the teachers weren't all Catholic, and we didn't speak much, if at all, on the topic of Christianity. There was also a prayer group that I was a part of before I briefly left eventually. So all in all, I can honestly say that this school did not help me in my faith. Did not contribute anything new. At that point, I would say what I had was not necessarily faith. I would say what I had was hope. Faith, in my opinion, is just a more potent form of hope. So this is where I first experienced the biggest decline in my hope. Please allow me to add, guys, that this part of my life was the worst period of my life. Let me tell you guys, high school is where self-esteem goes to die, okay? It's the graveyard, it's the cemetery of dreams. I became so distant from people, and I would turn to God in the desperate sense of, help me, but I don't think I was close with God at that time. I wasn't paying much attention to Him at all, I think, despite going to church on a regular basis. I just went to church out of habit, and also because my parents had to force me to go sometimes. Let me tell you guys, if you wanted to get out of church, you had to play dead or something, because black parents do not tolerate the "I'm not feeling like going to church" excuse. I think high school was just a big culture shock for me, because boys were allowed to hug girls, girls were allowed to wear spaghetti tops and short shorts, and I was exposed to more kids, more older kids, and the school just offered a lot more than my old school in terms of extramural activities. It sounds ridiculous, guys, but I went from a school where everyone I knew was in one class for each grade to going to a school that had 3 classes for each grade. So it was just very big for me to handle, and also, to make matters worse, I was the only one from my class in my primary school to have transferred to this school. So I just felt like a fish out of water. Christianity didn't play a big role in the school, and everyone and everything just felt very foreign to me. However, the only time that I would desperately seek God was during exams.
It's sad to say, but it's true.
I would just run to the chapel to make a quick prayer before dashing back. So that was roughly the extent of my relationship with God at the time. For me, I think it was more of like a "please give me this and I'll be good" kind of situation that I had. Because of my state of mind back then, I just assumed that every time something bad happened, it was that God was punishing me for something I had done. So at that point, my theory became good behavior equals a good life, and I will delve deeper into that in another video when I'm ready as to why I came up with that thought pattern. But I think a lot of us have also come up with that kind of deduction of how life works and how God works. So by the time I went to my first university, because I went to 2, side note, this university didn't really care about religion. If they did, I never saw it. So at this point, I felt really insecure about who I was, and I didn't really have hope that I would make friends or that God would change my situation, because I had prayed and cried in the past hoping that He would, and nothing much changed. I just thought this was gonna be high school part 2. But things got much better, guys. It was almost euphoric after what I had been through, but oddly enough, I still wasn't, close to God despite the changes. After spending 1 year at that university, I moved to my last one. And this university, guys, was just all embracive of all religions, sexualities, and opinions. There was even a place for Muslims to go and pray, because they have certain points in which they have to go pray. And also church was held on campus. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were also societies for different faiths on the campus. So guys, this is where I experienced the biggest culture shock in the best way, because people were just more different and more outspoken, and also more open about who they were. So for me, it was just a great thing to witness in some ways. Oddly enough, when I moved to this university, it's when I really started to seek God, and that was because I was gonna be away from home for the first time. And during that point, I was hung up on a primary school song that I remember we used to sing, and it went along the lines of "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added unto you." And it stems from Matthew 6:33. As soon as I started putting that verse into practice, guys, my life just moved. Things just began to move. Like, I wasn't as anxious in crowd settings, I made friends easily, my grades were good, and I was actually having a good time being alive. I remember I would watch my mom every Sunday as she would take notes and thinking that she was just doing too much, but then I began doing it. I started to come to church purposefully to seek God, and also I visited other denominational churches just to experience how they did things. When I say that I have never experienced God's hand in my life like I did at that time, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I had this inexplicable peace wherever I went. I would talk to him as I would walk to the bus and just be so sure that he would have my back throughout the day. In a short amount of time, guys, I was able to feel the Holy Spirit wash over me, and to have been able to have experienced a life where God is ever present just makes me look at my old life like that was a joke. So that, my friends, is the end of my background, okay? I hope you made it this far. Congratulations if you did. The next video will be on the true start of my walk with God, and that will be uploaded by next week, hopefully. No, I should upload it. I must, okay? So just subscribe to this channel, because you know, when I upload it, you need to be notified, or else you'll have watched this for no reason. Also click the notification so that you are alerted when that video is uploaded. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Like, really, man, I want a refund. I want a refund. I want a Oh, I have to be quick. Like, really, man.